feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Dom and Chris here, just a couple local Tucson comedians who like talking about sports and sports-related things, recording live down here at Engle Studio, which is downtown for all of your audio needs. And Chris, who do we got today?
We're talking about the 93 Phillies, one of the best turnaround seasons and maybe biggest collapses at the end. And we got a special guest. Who do we have today?
Today we have Charles Ludwig with us. Charles, how you doing, big guy?
I'm doing great, guys. It's fantastic. I wouldn't call it a collapse. We'll get into that.
I wanted to say something that I
Chernobyl
knew.
meltdown, maybe not
Yeah.
a collapse, but
Similar in a way to what we just saw in October of 2022
That's
into
true.
November.
yeah.
Just losing to a better team that was really good.
Was that nostalgic?
It was eerily
Depressingly
familiar.
nostalgic.
Yeah. But we'll get into it. It was different also because this year's Phils weren't good the whole year. You know,
Yeah.
they just kind of got hot.
Just-
93. We'll get
that's
into it.
very
I'm happy
true.
to talk about it. It was one of the first years I paid attention to as a young Phillies fan, and I remember it like the back of my hand. Well, we'll see how good I remember it based on the notes we have here.
But you grew up here in Tucson?
I did, yeah. My dad's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, though, and so I just kind of adopted his teams as my teams when I was a kid. There was no D-backs back then.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
did
that's
live
how
in
I be.
Pennsylvania for 1 year.
That's how I became a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
Is that my dad brought it over and
See,
he was,
our parents do this to us.
Yeah,
I
my
know.
mom was a Steelers fan because Arizona had no pro sports teams.
Yes.
We have
outside the
to root
Suns.
for their shitty teams. We have to get their alcoholism genes in us and all.
Yes.
You know, it's
I could go for a beer. What
Yeah.
time is it? 11:30? All
Crack
right.
open a cold one. I think, 11:30. All right. Well, jumping right in here. The 93 Phillies are an interesting story because after the 1983 season, when they lost in the World Series to Baltimore, in came about a decade of depression for this organization because the team was getting older. Pete Rose is gambling and leaving the team. Mike Schmidt is getting older as he's headed towards a Hall of Fame career. And from 84 to 92, they had 6 managers, and outside of an 86 and 75 second place finish to the 86 Mets, they finished 500 or worse every single season after that World Series appearance. But hope comes in the form in 1991 when Jim Fregosi is hired as manager, who we brought up in our Nolan Ryan episode. Yep, that's right. But 92 was kind of the rock bottom because the season previous, their newly acquired center fielder, Lenny Dykstra, and face of the franchise, Darren Daulton, got in a car accident, which resulted from a bachelor party for first baseman John Kruk, who we'll get into later.
that was in Reading, Pennsylvania, I believe.
I believe
remember.
so.
Yeah.
And you know what? In Reading, Pennsylvania, boys will be boys. So they just kind of swept that one.
They Dykstra had a BAC and drove his red Mercedes into a tree of .18.
Jeez.
Of .18, which at that time was probably still legal. They were at Smokey Joe's bar, and they basically bottomed out in 91, and then in 92 they finished last in the NL East.
Yeah.
And not a lot of hope, but you were talking previously about the end of 92, Charles.
Yeah, I was like 10 years old, and I remember watching a game at the end of the season. They were playing Atlanta, so I was watching TBS. And in my 10-year-old mind, I was like, well, we're going to be good in 93 because we're already focusing on 93. We're already getting prepared
Yep.
right now. So I actually was optimistic heading into 93, and as fate would have it, I was probably not right as far as the reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I did see something about them talking about 92, Dalton being the cooler, fucking stepping in.
Yes, he did.
And, well, he was talking about it. He was just like, I actually I won the RBI title as a catcher that year.
Yep.
And in the clubhouse, and this is kind of messed up to say, and it'll kind of ring true later on. They literally were like, we could be a good team if we get some relief pitching that kind of sticks. And because he was talking about how many runs they scored, I think they were actually second in runs behind the Pirates, but they were so bad at giving up. Like they were essentially losing like 8-7 games like that in 92, but they were saying like, our offense is actually good, especially with like Lenny leading off and just like all this stuff that you kind of look at, you're like, this could be a good team.
Yeah.
The thing that I love about them talking in 92, they were like, we all used to just go to the bars all the time together, and they had never been on a team like that. Like everybody was more professional, like going home kind of shit like that. And they were just like, no, we just go get hammered all the time and talk baseball. And I was like, that's the kind of team I want.
Yeah.
Going into 93, that's like the feeling that I want, was they were like, no, we can get runs.
Yeah,
that was it.
Stop teams.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that camaraderie that was built researching this team is a lot of these players were not homegrown talent. Dalton was really the only guy kind of brought up in their organization. A lot of these guys came from other teams that were like cast-offs or Philadelphia had traded for, particularly their starting pitching staff. Yeah. All 5 guys were on a different team to start their career, or at least one different team.
Yeah.
So
I remember it before 93, the only starter that we thought was good in my mind was Terry Mulholland.
Yeah, and
Schilling hadn't really gotten it together yet, right?
And they had got him from the Giants.
And I don't remember Tommy Green before 93 either. So
yeah, he'd come over from Atlanta. Rivera also was from Atlanta, and then Schilling, as we'll get into. We already did an episode on him. And
well, he's a great guy. He's a great man. He's a guy.
I do like when you mentioned they're hanging out at bars. So obviously the 2 best players on the team nearly dying in a DUI really influenced them.
But it literally didn't deter them. That was the thing going into 93. Yeah. That's what they were talking about. They were just like, we're still the same. And there were just like so many great quotes with them. Like I think it was Dalton. He was just like, the GM was telling us. It was just like, that's the end. Just like how Dom's dressed right now. You know what I mean?
You don't have to give a shit. Just produce results.
Right.
Which that was something else I feel like comes with these guys that were kind of not like overlooked, but not given the right time at their original teams. And then going to Philadelphia, they all play unbelievably hard. And they were saying they all knew their role going into 93, which sometimes is unclear at bigger teams where they're trying to like coddle stars and shit like that. Man, I'm cursing a lot for the first bit here.
It's 93 Phillies, man.
That's it. Let's do it, man. Let's get into it.
There was I just wanted to bring up this one story. So one of their outfielders who was platooning in, I believe, a right field, Jim Eisenreich, he had come to Philadelphia in 93, and he has Tourette's syndrome. And after he was diagnosed, a lot of his teammates in Minnesota and Kansas City kind of would like stay away from him or like not want to get to know him. And the first day he walks into spring training, John Kruk sees that he's kind of a quiet, reserved guy, and he nicknames him Jeffrey Dahmer. And then later, Eisenreich's wife came up to Kruk and said, "Thank you for including my husband. Well, he really needed this."
Well, she said that once that he came out at having Tourette's, that he felt like he wasn't part of the clubhouse anymore. And they immediately started making fun of him, like the way that they did with everybody else. And she was like, "Thank you for that. He needed that, you know?" Like, yeah.
But
when he arrived on the Phillies, was he like, does everyone on this team have Tourette's? Because there's probably a lot of random profanities getting thrown out there. Yeah.
It was definitely the
Fit
team.
right in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everyone needs one guy like that, though. One guy to just be like, all right, maybe just take it back a scotch. But 92 was so embarrassing, though, for Philadelphia that they were picking the expansion Marlins to finish ahead of them in the NL East and everybody's preseason predictions and stuff like that. So, but they get off hot. They get off hot to a hot start this season. They roll into Houston and get a 3-game sweep, and this is when you start seeing the pitching staff kind of forming.
Well, let me bring up this little preseason gem that I saw.
Okay.
Because there was some kind of heat. Somebody would like pitched inside, and then they were like ready for the season because going into it, and this is spring training. I forgot who they were playing, but then the Phillies pitcher just straight up like beams whoever, and there's a straight up like,
Cardinals,
the Cardinals, and there's like a bench clearing, and they were like, I think it was Mitch Williams or somebody was just like, no, we cleared the benches during spring training. We were so ready for this season. And that's like probably what you look at with going into 92, where you see a bunch of guys who were like kind of like not as into it. And then in 93, it felt like the entire clubhouse was into it right off of the bat. And yeah, because you never see that in spring training. You'll never see it nowadays.
You barely see it in the regular season.
Exactly. That was the energy going into it was,
well, the interesting
Lenny Dykstra energy, I feel like.
Yeah, Lenny Dykstra. It's a lot better than Cheryl Miller energy.
Well, don't get me started on Cheryl. Do you know her brother plays basketball?
I've heard about that. I think I heard that on Seinfeld.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. But 93 is interesting in the NL East, though, because the Pirates, who had won the last 3 years, they've let go of Barry Bonds. All of their best players are gone. So it's wide open between everyone in the division, including the Phillies.
Yep.
And they kind of seized that window of opportunity to where, hey, Atlanta's not here yet.
Right.
Let's, make a run at this thing.
Now, is 93, was there some sort of realignment with the Marlins coming in where the Braves were moved to the West?
No, they had been in the West since they were in Atlanta because MLB didn't understand geography for about a quarter century.
I have an uncle who's a Giants fan, and he always looks back on 93, and he blames the Cubs for the NLCS not being Giants-Braves.
Yep.
Because the Cubs whined about being in the NL West or something.
Oh, they were in
that's
the
why
East,
the Giants got moved there, and they put the Cubs in the East. I don't know. This is his crybaby Giants thing, but it worked out well for the Phillies because we'll get into it later, but I think the Braves and Giants both won a lot more games than the Phillies.
104, 103, yeah. But not to sneeze at Philadelphia, though. They had a great April. They spent, outside of one day during the regular season, every day was spent in first place.
Wow.
Yeah. They finished April up 4.5 games with a 17-5 record, and you really start seeing the offense kind of. They're almost a Moneyball team before Moneyball existed because it was a lot of high on base percentage with pitch selection and walks, and just dudes who could flat out rake.
Yeah. Wasn't Billy in the team?
Huh?
Wasn't Billy Beane in the team or no?
No, he wasn't with Philadelphia. I'm just saying pre-Moneyball because they were kind of doing similar things.
Yeah. I remember he played for Philly at one point. So I was just, I was trying to think was this the year? But you're so right in which they rotated their team a lot more.
They platooned a lot, which was different from that because in left field they had Milt Thompson and Pete Incaviglia, who absolute stud of a man with the flowing mullet and the beer gut, just knocking dingers. And then in right field you had Eisenreich and Wes Chamberlain, and then Mariano Duncan would play pretty much all over the infield.
Yeah. And Mickey Morandini was on the team. Yeah. He would play second quite a bit, right?
Second base, yeah.
I remember who ended the year at shortstop. I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But who was the shortstop at the start of the season? Estrada or?
There was Juan Bell, and then Duncan would play there.
Okay.
Yeah, because, National League, no designated hitter at this time.
Right.
Thank God that they changed that. But, but Dykstra is the main star of this team.
Yeah.
He has arguably, if it wasn't for Barry Bonds, as we talked about in that episode, just being an absolute monster, Dykstra probably should have won the MVP.
Yeah. Yes.
I think he finished second that year.
Yep.
And he was the table setter from the get-go.
And he was healthy all year, which is kind of a rarity at that point for him.
Because he was car accidents. Because in 92, he got hit on opening day on his hand.
Oh, yeah.
So he missed most of that season, too. So you had the engine of the team, and he talked about bribing umpires as well to give him a more favorable strike zone in his wonderful autobiography.
Yeah.
How much of it is true, I don't know, but that's kind of hilarious.
I don't want to cast shadows on this Phillies team, but let's be honest, because Dykstra was. I saw an interview where he showed up to spring in the best shape of his career.
Oh, yeah. This was the time for
so
it.
much muscle mass. And reporters asked him, what did you do? And he said, I've been taking magical pills. So,
You just won't see a time like this anymore.
This may be what led to Bonds eventually.
This little motherfucker.
I was taking magical pills.
Yeah.
That's what he said. God,
You got to respect the
it.
honesty, and it's before the strike and all that, so it's not a big deal.
Just so good.
Yeah.
And I feel like reporters were like, all right, here we go. Phillies up.
Yeah.
But he led MLB that year in plate appearances, led the NL in at-bats, Major League Baseball with 143 runs, and the NL in hits with 194. But those power numbers, 19 dingers. I don't know if he hit 19 previous to that when he was with the Mets. So possibly some chemical enhancement. But when your table setters
it's not to Brady Anderson or
Yeah,
Luis
right.
Gonzalez level, but
Just the one off season where you go, what happened here? Exactly what happened?
yeah.
But like I was saying before, a lot of these guys did come from other organizations, including their amazing first baseman. Broke my heart as a child when San Diego traded him away because he told the owner's wife, Joan Kroc, to fuck off after an at-bat. John Kroc. Oh, Crocker. If you're not familiar, John Kroc was a heavy-set first baseman. Really, all he could do was rake, but he did rake very well.
Yeah.
Hit 316 that year, scored 100 runs, just a line-to-line hitter, 33 doubles, 14 dingers, and 111 walks, and was an all-star that year. It was a very famous all-star game, I believe, with John Kroc. They're playing at Camden Yards. He's facing Randy Johnson, the bird murderer. Takes a fastball upstairs and decides, you know what? I think what was the quote? He said, "I had a choice. Do I want to get a hit or do I want to live?"
Yeah.
But no, Crocker finished the at bat with basically his helmet on backwards and free swinging at balls completely out of the strike zone.
Yeah, and standing way at the back of the box.
Yeah.
Kind of looking like it maybe back before the DH, if you ever saw an American League reliever somehow bat in a World Series.
Oh my
game.
God!
Oh yeah.
That's what he looked like.
We're headed to extras. Let the comedy begin.
Yeah.
But they were, I mean, they, like I said, they finished or the season obviously in first place, but throughout the entire season they were in first place. In May they went 17-10 to go 34-15 for the year.
Yeah.
And at this time they're pretty much humming along because the Cardinals and Expos really aren't catching them.
Right.
Like they're kind of have control of the NL East while the NL West is being decided by two monsters.
Right. And the Giants, I think, had a big lead, and then the Braves got McGriff because the Padres are the gift that keeps
Oh,
giving.
they were the
yeah.
90s version of just, here you go, All-Star, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Oh, you bastards. There was a game during the summer where they had just traded Gary Sheffield for a reliever named Trevor Hoffman. And there was a doubleheader where they were playing the Padres, and it started because of rain at about 1 a.m., and it goes into extra innings, and Trevor Hoffman comes into the game and gives up a single to Mitch Williams.
Mitchie Poo.
Mitchie Poo, that was, a relief pitcher batting to win the game, the first of many Trevor Hoffman blown saves. But, oh, God. But, no, Philadelphia is absolutely killing it by the summertime. Anything you want to add?
I was going to say about Kruk is the thing that was fun about the 93 Phillies, I feel like a lot of the league was rooting, a lot of fans were rooting for them. They're the ultimate underdogs. And I think Kruk kind of helped bring the personality of the team actually to a national level. You can go back on YouTube and find him getting interviewed on David Letterman.
Yep.
And he's such an affable, funny guy. Like, I think he's interviewed during the 92 season, and he's asked, why do you put so much gum?
Yeah.
He uses like 30 pieces of gum to start a game, and he goes, well, with our pitching staff, I know I'm going to be out there a long time, in the field. And he talked about when Mitch Williams came to the team.
Yep.
I think he had Mitch Williams' number that Mitch Williams wanted.
Yeah, And he changed
And so they worked out a trade because Mitch Williams had bought his wife all this jewelry with the number. And he's like, I don't want to rebuy the jewelry, Kruk. Help me out. And Kruk gave him the number for 264 packs of Miller High Life or something.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so if you go back and watch those interviews, they're hilarious. He talks about playing in Colorado for the first time in 93.
Yeah, how much fun it
walking
was.
and telling the first base coach that if there's a hit, he's not going to run because he's winded from walking to first base. And,
Here's my range factor.
Yeah. So.
You're right. He was like the guy that was like appealing to non-Phillies fans where you were like, this guy's cool. And then everybody kind of had that look, especially in that 93 era of just kind of like Zumbas. And that was like
Zubas.
Cool, like it really was a cool looking team where
Bullets, mustaches, beards.
and both overweight and in shape guys. Like they literally had the full, like, you know what I mean, spectrum of like just dudes. It was just like a clubhouse of dudes.
You have like Dalton and Hollins, like who would take their shirts off at the pool, and nobody else on the team would.
I think Igavilius you would. I don't
He
know.
would, yeah. I mean, when you're a Guido, you take it off. I mean,
I think if he had the body of, like, if you watch Strongest Man competitions, it's not like well-formed shredded muscle. It's just a.
But it's
mass.
muscle.
Yeah.
It's just
it's
mass.
just power. It's mass. So, like, we don't even get into conversation about body mass, Mac.
Yeah. I think Kruk also was portrayed by Chris Farley on an episode or two of Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
that
so
year.
good.
And that's perfect right there, Farley and Kruk.
100%.
Yeah.
There was a quote he had at that spring training. He was drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette, and some woman comes up to him and says, "You're a professional athlete. How can you do this to yourself?" And he said, "I'm not an athlete, ma'am. I'm a ball player."
Yeah. That's awesome.
But that was the mentality of this whole team.
Yeah.
It was just like, do everything to win. If we get some pitching, Lord willing, we will find ourselves in postseason contention.
Yep.
And they kind of drop off a little in the summer. They have like a little let up in those dog days where you just kind of see that in a lot of teams. So like they get into July, I think they were like 52 and 25, and everyone was just like, what the hell is happening? Like, I imagine from 92 to that point, halfway or whatever in July, and you're just like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
You're
not expecting it. Like, because of just what had happened, because you had the Mets there in the late 80s, then the Pirates rolling in, and then you're like, who is this team, and how do they keep winning? I think a big reason, though, why was the emergence of Curt Schilling as their ace.
I was just going to say, they had a bunch of their starting pitchers that really came, and Schilling, you saw really, I feel like this was his coming out party.
All of the guys had almost career years, excluding Danny Jackson, who had a good year, but then came through huge in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But Schilling, this is his first year as like a bona fide top of the rotation guy.
And at the end of the year, his ERA though was a little over 4, right? So did he, or was it under 4?
No, it was just over 4,
Okay.
but he had 7 complete games,
Right.
which is
We have to remember this is the steroid era, and if you look back at aces, they were
it
not
was
unhittable.
350
right?
plus, unless
Yeah.
you're Greg Maddux or somebody.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, Tommy Green won 16 games. Ben Rivera won 13.
Yeah.
And then Mulholland and Jackson each won 12.
Yeah.
And then Schilling had 16 wins. So when you're getting that type of productivity out of 5 guys, that's pretty much amazing.
And Williams had a ton of saves. That was the other thing.
A ton of saves and even wins, too, because of the blown saves.
Yep.
And if we could have had the mindset back then of getting more than one good reliever, it would have helped us later on. But no team really.
Was in that
We're just
mindset.
happy with having one closer.
Yeah.
And that's
It was just kind of a mishmash of dudes.
Yeah.
It was Roger Mason, David West. Larry Anderson was 40. He was on that 83 team that went to the World Series. Yeah. Him and Dalton, who was like basically a September call-up, were the only guys left from that era because they had pretty much drained their their farm system by that point.
I had a VHS tape in the early 90s of sports bloopers.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a segment on there with Kruk and Larry Anderson.
Yes.
Had a spray can of spray-on hair that they used to have for bald people, and they were spraying it on their foreheads, making themselves look like Eddie Munster. And
they put it on his head, and Mitch Williams walks in, and he's like, "Oh my God, you got hair!"
Yeah.
But they struggled to
loose.
kind of put in that middle relief, though. I remember they brought in Mark Davis, who had won a Cy Young in San Diego, as their closer back in, I think, '89, and it just never panned out for them.
Yeah.
They just kept winning games with strong starting pitching, and the guys in their lineup just raking.
Yeah.
Well, and really going starting pitching to Williams. There was so much more of that than you'll ever see now.
Yeah.
Where it really was, and complete games. Like you were saying, Schilling at 7.
Exactly. Not the Dave Roberts style of managing.
Yeah. When we were talking about how these guys were, it was just a bunch of drunk goofballs, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing before '93, I don't remember when he stopped being a Philly, but we had Dale Murphy.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Mormon.
Yeah, and it might have been addition
was
by
the year
subtraction.
before,
Even
yeah.
though he's a great player, like I can't imagine he was happy with these shenanigans going on.
Well, I saw a quote going into '93. They said we had 24 morons and 1 Mormon, and that was like just the way the Phillies were.
Wait, the guy in his special underwear isn't here? Oh, it's time to party.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Busted out.
wives, plural? I don't think so.
They don't do that anymore, and they didn't back then.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't want to get
Baseball players are
Banned here,
known,
guys.
for not. Come on.
No, but you could see how like he's just not the right fit for that team. You know?
Yes.
Plus he's a Brave and
Yeah, and then as we'll get to in the playoffs, he's in the Braves clubhouse, palling
Dale
around with
Murphy
them.
was.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I never even realized that. Wow.
When they meet each other. But yeah, they have kind of that late summer dog days issue. They're up by 6 games, 66-39 by July. And then in August, they go 16-11, and you're thinking, oh, we're up 9.5.
Yep.
This is our division to completely win. And then they have some big issues in September where St. Louis has fallen off, but Montreal was catching them, and this is the
Montreal's 1 year away.
They're 1 year away from
goodness.
winning that. Oh no, they didn't have the World
Thank goodness
Series.
they didn't gel like they did in '94 for the whole season.
Oh,
Wow.
I know, right? They kept referring back to the '64 season in Philadelphia, which is like arguably, I mean, it's not Mets level collapse in terms of being hilarious. This was just actually depressing to learn about. In '64, they basically blew a huge lead with like maybe a week to go.
Gene Mock as manager.
Yep.
My dad tells me he made some pitching choices.
Yeah.
Went to a 3-man
They went to a 3-man
that
rotation.
didn't work out.
But they kept referring to the fold of '64. Their lead was down to 4 games with 15 left to play.
Oh boy!
After a walk-off loss against the Expos, but they ended up putting together a 4-game win streak, and on September 28th, '93, they win 10-7 against the Pirates to clinch the NL East. This lovable band of throwbacks.
That's awesome.
Finished 97-65, up 3 on the Expos, which is crazy to think that they won 97 games to win their division, and in the NL West, it takes 104.
And it came down to the last day of the season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about it in the Bonds episode where they Atlanta got hot. They got to play the expansion Rockies, and the Giants had to play the Dodgers.
Right. Yep.
And Mike Piazza, with his mullet, just absolutely destroyed them.
I saw a quote on Mike Piazza, and he said the reason why he grew his hair out like that was because Murderers Row Macho Row. Excuse me, but that's literally, he was just like, that was my influence coming into the league, where I was like, those dudes are bad ass, and I was like, he did look like, not like he was in that clubhouse, but like a kid watching them and being like, I want to be cool like them.
And he's a Philly guy too. He's from
he
Eastern PA.
I don't know what was going on with scouting back then, but I believe I've read that Piazza was kind of signed by the Dodgers as a courtesy, but sorta.
Yep.
Well, he couldn't.
He was dad.
He wasn't even a catcher. He was just like a good hitter.
Yeah.
And he had pitchers that were like furious with him.
Yeah, because you couldn't throw anybody out on the bases.
Yep.
But when you hit over 400 dingers,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
People tend to look the other way.
Couple things real quick. We mentioned Tommy Green. I remember, so we had the stars playing well. We had the pitching coming together. 2 guys on the roster that kind of felt like at the time they came out of nowhere and had great seasons.
Go ahead.
Tommy Green and Dave Hollins.
Yeah.
Dave Hollins, I think, was an all-star.
Dave
Played
Hollins
great
was a
third base.
former Padre prospect
Yeah.
who was selected. This is just, when I read through all of this, it's just like, you could have had these bastards.
Yeah, and I believe we'll face some Padres in the World Series as well.
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah.
One of them very heartbreaking
Yeah.
for me. But Hollins was a switch-hitting third baseman.
Yep.
He had over 90 RBIs that year, close to 20 dingers. Played some good defense at times, as we'll get into later. But that's all you wanted.
This sounds real familiar now with Alec Baum.
Yeah.
Playing good defense at times. Getting some hits. Wow.
And he kind of emerged as a nice middle of the order to threat to protect Dalton and then get to the bottom of the lineup. And
I think that was as big as anything. These kind of guys having their best years, like you talked about, along with the stars being healthy.
And he had a rockin' mullet too.
Yep. The other thing I want to say is September '93. It's awesome. The Phillies clinched the division. And Boy Meets World debuts with Corey Matthews
as a
being
Phillies
Philly
fan. Oh my gosh.
Weird.
It's nuts, dude.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you made the first Boy Meets World reference, because I was like, if I do it, it's just going to look bad, because I've done it like 8 times already. So.
But yeah, Green had a 3.42 ERA, 7 complete games also like Schilling, and 200 innings pitched. And this was like his best season in Major League Baseball, because he was a trade piece for Dale Murphy, actually.
Yeah.
So he was in that deal, headed to Philadelphia from Atlanta, who at the time just had pitching prospects
What
out
did the
the
Phillies
ass.
give up for Murphy? I don't remember.
I forget who they
I thought he
ended
was
up
a
giving
free
up.
agent signing.
No,
Okay.
they had traded him to Philadelphia
Yeah.
to get better again.
It's amazing to hear about all these complete games, and it's the steroid era of hitters.
Yeah.
And now we don't have steroids.
You barely
We
see
have
guys
guys
go
that strike out a
5.
lot,
Yeah.
and I don't think there was 7 complete games in the entire major leagues
No.
this year. Yeah, so
Roy Halladay was the last of his kind,
Yeah,
I believe.
yeah.
Former Phillies pitcher.
Yep.
But make it to the postseason. Oddly enough, I was going through their records against teams in '93 in the National League because
Yeah.
you didn't have interleague play. They actually had a losing record against one team in the National League, and it was the Giants.
Yeah.
Really?
Oddly enough, which
Tough
that would have
team.
been a very interesting series.
Yeah,
I
I
feel
know.
like.
I remember being happy when the Braves beat out the Giants
Yeah.
for that reason, probably.
Because Bonds is doing just
Now,
Bonds things.
keeping it about Phillies, but I remember one of my favorite quotes from an interview ever came from Will Clark
oh
on
god,
the day they I think they got spanked by the Dodgers on the last day of
yeah,
the season.
they got murdered.
And I was watching Sports Center as a young man, and Will Clark is shirtless, just looking pissed at his locker. Will Clark, the first baseman for the Giants.
He and a famous asshole, just a douchebag.
I don't blame him though, because some of the questions these guys.
Oh
get
no,
asked,
no, no!
yeah.
I'm talking about overall,
Yeah.
but in the moment, I totally agree with you, Will.
So the reporter just asks him, hey, Will, what went wrong out there? And Will just looking like he's burning a hole through this guy. What went wrong? I think what went wrong is we got our asses kicked. I think that's what went wrong. We went in with a plan to not get our asses kicked, and then we did get our asses kicked. He just laid it out there,
Because he knew he was leaving after the season too. He
Was
headed-
he?
yeah,
Off to
he
the
was free
Rangers
agent.
there?
Yeah, mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could see him being very upset and knowing
Yeah.
that the NLCS would have been played against
Plus,
the
they
team
had.
you're
I
good
think they
against.
had a big lead but the Braves got
did.
so hot with McGriff.
Yeah, they what Atlanta basically did, if you're not familiar and haven't heard me rant on this podcast, Atlanta said, there's an all-star first baseman in San Diego. He's led both the National League and the American League in home runs, and we need an upgrade over Sid Bream. So what we're going to do is not take our best prospects like Chipper Jones and Ryan Klesko.
man. Yeah.
We're going to trade the person equivalent of a washing machine and see if they take it, and they did. They did. Oh, but they got it. McGriff was awesome that season. For
You've told me this
Yeah, yeah.
washing machine thing so much, I thought it was a washing machine. Who's the player that's the equivalent
It's
of a washing
Melvin Yevis and like 2 other guys that
Okay.
were like mid to low level Braves prospects
Right.
that they gave up.
Sheesh.
And the reason that San Diego did this and they traded Sheffield, they didn't obviously think Trevor Hoffman would be a Hall of Famer. They were
Yeah.
just shedding payroll. And because Tony
So they
Gwynn
traded
was
Sheffield to the Marlins.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I thought they gave him up in the expansion
no,
draft or something.
they traded him in the summer. You just won a
Wow.
batting title. like
Unbelievable.
But they were
Wow.
just cutting salary.
the
That was
only
their
person that
only.
they were paying was Tony Gwynn because if they had traded Tony Gwynn or let him go free agent
with the McDonald's money.
Yeah.
They're shedding.
No, they had new ownership by this
Oh,
point.
okay.
Yeah, Joan,
Wow.
because Kruk, I think, was traded in '90 for Craig James's brother.
Wow.
So,
And a 64 pack of Miller
Miller
Lite.
Lite, yeah. Coming
High
on
Life.
in.
Oh, shit.
No light for those guys.
It's true. They do live the high life. That is very true. They drink the champagne of beers, and that's what they drink.
That's
Yes.
Coors. You're getting mixed up now.
No,
Coors
that's
Coors is the banquet beer.
yes.
Coors is the banquet.
I was gonna say, they
Rocky
all have
Mountain
some
Feel free to
Stupid.
smack me.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah. So
Yeah, and they head into the postseason, which, it's a clash of styles, shall I say?
Yep.
A clash of styles because you have the Braves, who have are heading to their 3rd consecutive NLCS, and you have the Phillies, who came out of nowhere in last place, almost major league style, ready to give the world the big shitburger to eat.
yep. Trying to think of-
Shitburgers?
Yeah. The Braves were a great team. Great pitching. David Justice, Ron Gant, right? Terry Pendleton had won an MVP, I think.
Yeah, he won that gap year for Bonds. He
Yeah.
could have won, 4 in a row.
Yep. And in addition to Maddox, Maddox was 93 as his first year as a Brave, right?
Yeah, you just come
So
over
they
from
have
Chicago.
Smoltz, Glav, and Avery, and then they had Maddox.
Yep.
It's almost like the
Coming.
Miami Heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LeBron and Wade and all that. It's
But the interesting thing,
Yeah.
Maddox is the only guy they didn't draft.
right.
They just went out and picked him up.
Yep.
Which is pretty amazing.
I was going
Yep.
to say that farm system, man. They really had some prospects and tricked some Padres. All right.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
But yeah, so we get into this Braves, which everybody I feel like is going for the Braves. Am I crazy? Just because they're coming off such a winning mentality.
And they haven't won a World Series yet.
Yep.
And they had won 104 games, but
and the 91 and 92 World Series were extremely close. I forgot how
Yeah.
close the 92 one was. They almost came back and won that game 6.
They did, yeah.
Yeah,
They sent it to extras.
I certainly was not rooting for them.
No.
I don't think a lot of people were.
I remember game 1 very vividly because Schilling's on the mound.
Yeah, so we'll
He
get into
came
the
out
NLCS.
firing. Yeah, we'll get into it.
October 6, 93. It's at Veterans Stadium because at that time...
Everybody wanted an enormous dome, carpeted.
Yeah.
You can't tell where the games are looking back. It could be Cincinnati, Atlanta, Philadelphia,
Pittsburgh,
Houston.
all of the cookie cutter stadiums,
Yep.
the concrete dungeons.
Yeah.
Didn't they have a processing center in the bottom of Veterans Stadium?
Yep, they had to. That was for Eagles games.
That was
They had
for
to
Eagles games,
Install a
okay.
jail in case people got too worked up.
But yeah, as we talked about in our Avery episode, this was his best year too.
Yeah.
So he was looking like the ace of Atlanta staff facing Schilling, and he's just absolutely mowing down Atlanta. This is
They started Avery in game 1.
Yeah.
Was that due to having to spend other guys to win the season, or would they have? That's crazy. To me.
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
thinking they did, but he
was also had a really great season. So I
It was
feel
his
like
all-star season. He won
Yeah.
18 games, but he had sustained that injury in San Diego in August that they weren't diagnosing properly, and he was not telling the medical staff like,
What?
maybe I need a day off. But
Yeah.
you couldn't take
Yeah.
a day off because you got to catch the Giants.
Yep.
Schilling, this is where he starts building his resume as, in my opinion,
Yeah.
one of the best postseason pitchers in Major League Baseball history.
Yep.
The game is kind of wacky throughout as far as what ends up happening because as we'll
Yeah.
get into Schilling and what happens afterwards, he doesn't win a game
Right.
in this NLCS.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't get
A single
on the
win.
stat sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not recorded. Schilling strikes out the first 3 hitters to start the game.
That's what I remember, and I remember being nervous. It's Atlanta, and just feeling peace, like, oh, he's locked in.
Yep.
I'm sure the rest of the Phillies team felt that way. you
Well,
know?
it was important for him to start hot, though. Not only at home, but just like show Atlanta, like, hey, we deserve to be here. Like, we're on your level.
Yeah, and these weren't work to count strikeouts. It was
No.
strike 1, 2, 3, as I remember, just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, they get an early lead. Kruk has an RBI grounder scoring Dykstra after a leadoff double, which that was basically the formula all season for them. Was Dykstra get on base and then stake an early lead for your starters and let them cruise. The game goes into the 9th inning with Philadelphia leading 3-2, and this is where Mitch Williams comes in. Because Schilling has pitched 8, struck out 7, given up only the 2 runs and 10 strikeouts, that's exactly what you want out of your starter in the postseason.
Yeah.
Like, you can't ask for anything more. But Mitch Williams comes in and promptly decides to not win the game.
Well, I saw this thing about Mitch because his nickname was the Wild Thing. And they said that he had 2 pitches, which was a high 90s fastball, which, I mean, was great. And, oh, shit, get out of the way.
Right.
Like that, he threw so many balls and walked so many, essentially like walked more than you ever see a relief pitcher should.
Yeah.
And that's when people are saying that's why you see Kurt going into the dugout and just put a towel over because he starts walking and throwing balls. He's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I bet it's just really jarring, but man, it's got to be horrible to look over and see Kurt just being like a dickhead.
Was his other pitch a slider or?
Yeah, it was a slider. Yeah, we'll get into his
couldn't
famous
control either
slider.
particularly well,
and
yeah,
he never pitched from the stretch
Right.
until the postseason. He would
Yeah.
always go from the windup.
He'd also end up in an almost laying face down position
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
every single pitch. if I
Mechanically, it was not
Yeah.
the prettiest
crazy,
thing to
yeah.
watch as a baseball fan.
Yeah.
But
He'd almost like literally throw himself onto the ground.
Yeah.
It was
But in the 9th inning, they also, in addition to bringing in Williams, they take Hollins out and put Kim Batiste in at third base.
He makes an error,
So
doesn't he?
so what
Okay.
happens is
But then, okay, I
Bill
remember.
Pacoda and walks. Mark Lemke hits a ground ball, a tailor-made 5-4-3 double play
Yep.
to Batiste, who promptly throws the ball into right field.
Yeah.
Rafael Belliard has a sac bunt, and then a Notice Nixon ground out ties the game,
Yeah.
heading into the top of the 10th, and into the bottom of the 9th, the top of the 10th, they end up getting out of it with Mitch Williams. But then in the bottom of the 10th, Crucky gets a clutch double.
Yep.
Sitting there on second base.
And I remember who comes through.
Kim Batiste comes to the plate and hits a ground ball down the line to score Kruk from second.
Redemption.
So, yeah, definitely redemption.
Oh, man, I remember this now.
These games that they win are just like, you should have won that going away.
Yeah.
But they end up having the late game magic.
I want to throw out, even though I wasn't a Braves fan, I always loved Mark Lemke. He gave every little leaguer hope that they could one day make the majors because he looked like
like Make-A-Wish.
Your English teacher.
Yeah. He looked like your English teacher.
And he had tons of huge hits all the time in the playoffs.
He was clutch for them. Yeah, and he always wore his baseball cap under the batting helmet with the 2 ears because he was a switch hit. You don't see that anymore.
Yep.
Games 2 and 3, though, are a bit of a slog for Philadelphia. You have Green versus Maddox in Game 2, and then Glavine versus Mulholland in Game 3, that one at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. Game 2, the Braves scored 2 runs in the first, and then McGriff had a 3-run homer, and they won that absolutely going away.
Why did the Phillies have home field advantage here with the worst record?
See, that's what I couldn't figure out.
It was just flipped every year?
I think it was just flipped west to east every year, and then I remember in the mid-'90s, wild card teams wouldn't, even if they had the worst record,
they'd host.
Well, yeah, they would A, host games, which was insane, but B, they wouldn't play the team that won the division in their own division.
That's why we got Red
division
Sox,
series.
Yankees, LCS is so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is crazy
Cool,
to
just
think.
refreshing my memory there.
Yeah.
It's like some of those English rules.
It kind of shows how it's almost,
Yep.
yeah, it's helpful though. Like maybe the Phillies don't win Game 1 if it's in Atlanta and they don't have to fight. Yeah, so lucky.
Down two, or they were down 8-0 in Game 2 and just couldn't catch up. They lost 14-3. Just got absolutely spanked, and most people were just writing Philadelphia off at that point.
Yeah,
yeah, especially just the way those two, because like in the first game, they kind of squeak it out, even though they should have kind of walked it away.
Yep.
2, they kind of get beat, and then in Game 3, they get kind of handled. So, like, going into Game 4, everyone's just kind of like, all right. And especially, like what I was saying, the way the Braves were going into this, everyone was just kind of like, they're going to clean this up. But
yeah, because Glavine did a great job in Game 3. They won 9-4. They didn't have, like, didn't have a deficit the entire time.
Right.
Like, in these games, it was just, we're handling it with our pitching that we're famous for.
And who is Wohlers their closer at this time?
Wohlers their closer,
okay.
and
I remember
he's important in Game 5.
Yeah.
But Game 4, I won't say they're lucky, but it's very fortuitous because they have Danny Jackson on the mound for them starting the game. And if you don't know, Danny Jackson had already won a World Series in Kansas City. He was the guy in our S.E.P episode we talked about who won the Game 5 in the LCS against the Blue Jays, who had started. And then he won Game 5 against the Cardinals from our Ozzie Smith episode in that World Series as well when they were down 3-1 both times.
And he was the MVP along with Deckinger.
Oh, yeah, Dankinger, yeah. Oh, yeah, calling people out.
My brother's a Cardinals fan, and he always will throw out his opinions on that. But, yeah.
It was clearly obvious he was out. It was clearly obvious. And then in 1990, he was also on Cincinnati's staff when they won the World Series.
So he's a gamer. He's experienced.
And they don't have a lot of guys on this roster with postseason experience. I think Duncan was with the Dodgers and the Reds as well with Danny Jackson. And Dykstra as a Met. That's really all you had.
Yep.
But it's Danny Jackson against John Smoltz. And
the benefit of this is we don't have to listen to Smoltz's awful commentary during the game.
That is also very true. He's just talking to himself on the mound, and as Leo Mazzoni's rocking back and forth in the dugout. In this game.
This is the day game.
This is no. This is the. This isn't the day game. This is a night game.
Oh, okay.
Actually, this is.
That's right.
One where Danny Jackson also singles in a run to help his team.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So he basically was all over the place to help them win.
How long does he pitch in the game?
He went 7 2/3 innings, 9 hits, allowed 1 run in this game.
Wow.
Which 6 strikeouts too for him, and he wasn't a big strikeout guy either.
Yeah.
So he
was more democratic.
It was more democratic, more ground balls, getting it to Kevin Stocker and Mickey Morandini up the middle for him.
That's right.
You know, I remember in '94, the strike shortened year, Jackson was unhittable. He was just pitched so great. But anyway.
But they win the game 2-1 and tie the series, which is hugely important because if you lose that game, Atlanta already stole one. There's one more game in Atlanta. Yep. And this is the day game, Charles. This is the Game 5.
I remember this game vividly.
October 11th, 1993, in a chilling Avery Round 2 Electric Boogaloo. And basically Schilling does the exact same thing he did in game 1.
Yep.
I mean, he's just absolutely firing bullets. He goes 8 innings and strikes out 9.
Man.
And they're up 3-0 heading into the bottom of the 9th. And who comes in?
3-0.
Does Schilling? Yeah.
Now I know. Now I remember. Okay.
And 2 on. Am I right? With 2 on.
Well, no. There's nobody on at the bottom of the 9th.
Oh,
Yeah.
He's coming into the. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Mitch Williams comes in the bottom of the 9th.
I thought he came in
Get
the 8th.
3 outs
yeah,
before giving up 3 runs.
I-
That's
yeah.
his job. Now he'll go over what happened, and then I'll explain what was going through my
I was
life.
gonna
as
say-
this
No,
happened.
you're right. Schilling came in and he did put 2 on.
Okay.
Because he walked Jeff Blauser.
Yeah, that's
and
what I
then,
thought.
In the 8th?
Yeah, in the 8th. And Ron Gant hit another ground ball, or in the 9th, and Ron Gant hit another ground ball to Kim Batiste, who promptly threw it into right field.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
my
what I
goodness.
thought.
Yeah. So Williams comes in to put out the fire.
And he's the late game defensive replacement.
Yeah,
oh my
that's what I couldn't
goodness.
figure out. You take,
Just leave Hollins in the game.
just leave
I
him in.
know.
So McGriff comes up, he singles, then there's a sac fly, a Pendleton single, a Francisco Cabrera single, and then after Bill Pacoda flies out, it's 3-3 in the top
Yeah.
of the 10th. And Charles, you wanted to talk about this? What happened?
Well, I remember this being a day game because I watched it right when I got home from school, and we're up 3-0 heading into the 9th. You know how huge that is, going back to Philly up 3-2.
Yeah.
So it's my first experience as a young fan of seeing a game. You know, if you watch baseball for a while, you're always gonna experience this at some point. Hopefully not in the postseason.
Yeah, right?
I remember when the Braves tied it, I went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and started crying. And started saying how much I hated Mitch Williams, and I hated. I probably was throwing Batista in there, and but then I was in there getting myself together. I didn't want my dad to see me crying. I got very good news when I came out of the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because what happened? In the
So
next
Atlanta brings in their closer,
Yeah.
Mark Wallers, who basically had one pitch, 100-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yep.
Like 100-mile-an-hour plus fastball. He gets Mickey Morandini to fly out, and then Lenny Dykstra comes to the plate and just absolutely tattoos one into right center field.
Yeah.
And Harry Callis's call, a solo home run by the dude. Kruk used to always say he'd always bum cigarettes off of Harry Callis.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But
Just the camaraderie, even with the announcer. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like Lenny said he partied with him before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
And Lenny was saying, like, going into the at-bat, and even his teammates confirmed it, he was like, I'm going to hit a home run. I'm going to do it.
Man.
We'll go out there and end this freaking game.
Wow.
We're gonna go back to Philadelphia. And you can see
Did we
him
add another
yelling.
run too, or
Well, it's
sorry.
important because
Yeah.
they scored that third run off of a Dalton hit.
Right.
Because if they don't have that, the game is over
Yeah.
in the 9th inning.
Yeah.
But they're up 4-3, and then a Nixon flyout, a Blauser strikeout, and a Gant strikeout
Oh, so it was
end
a
up
one-run
saving the
run. Yeah.
day. And they
And
go
who,
back.
who pitched that final inning for Philly?
It was Williams. Yeah,
oh
he
my
came
God!
back, yeah.
What a weird era. We're leaving closer.
Oh
to
no!
Okay.
They put in Anderson. Excuse
Okay,
me.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, man, we should have maybe thought about Anderson against Toronto. But I'll just okay.
But in
Jeez.
they go back to Philly a couple days later, October 13th for Game 6, and
Yep.
it's again the clash of styles. You have Greg Maddux against Tommy Green, like the one established future Hall of Famer, and this guy who came out of nowhere to have a career year.
Yep.
And it's a night game at Veterans Stadium. Everybody's going because they're on the verge of clinching their first pennant in 10 years.
Yeah.
And in the bottom of the first, something very good happens for Philadelphia. Mickey Morandini hits a comebacker through the pitcher's box that hits Maddux in the foot.
Oh, okay.
So Maddux stayed in the game, but he didn't have his normal, precise and, the expanded Atlanta strike zone of the 90s, as we all remember, working for him.
Yeah.
But the Phillies are very lucky because they also are staked to a 2-0 lead off of a Darren Dalton double down the right field line.
Yep.
They get a big inning and a big lead, and Green is pitching effectively for them. He's doing a great job. Atlanta pulls within 2-1, but Hollins hits a 2-run homer in the top of the 5th. He's
Yeah.
kind of like you said, the unsung hero of this
Yep.
team to get a 3-run lead for your bullpen, which is desperately needed
Yep.
at this point.
I remember this night very well. I remember Tag Team Whoop, There It Is.
Yep, that
Popular
was their-
song
yep.
was getting played throughout that night with fans singing along.
One interesting thing I read in the Macho Row book was their team theme song was Two Princes by the Spin Doctors. And all I can think of is Charlie Kelly dressed as Serpico. There's your Spin Doctors mix. So they're up 4-1, and then Morandini ices it with a 2-run triple.
Yeah.
They're late in the game in the bottom of the sixth, I believe. Blauser pulls them within 6-3 in the following frame with a 2-run homer. David West comes in the eighth, though, and gets some 3 up, 3 down, which is sorely needed.
Nice.
And then Mitch Williams comes in the ninth, and because of the wild roller coaster season, gets 3 up, 3 down with a Pacoda strikeout to win.
Yep.
And they literally, David versus Goliath, upset Atlanta incredibly.
Yeah. And as a Philly fan in Tucson, the phone calls start rolling in from back east. Everybody's celebrating. I remember that night very well. I remember also October 93, weird time, because I remember watching a Blue Jays White Sox and ALCS game, and they announced Michael Jordan is retiring.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so just sprinkling in memories of that exact time.
Yeah.
But they're off to the World Series, and who do they face?
A very, very good team.
Looking back, a really stacked Toronto Blue Jay team. Like you're just like, geez, these Padres. I mean, Blue Jays.
So when I was growing up, my 2 favorite non-Tony Gwynn Padres were John Kruk and then the Blue Jays' future Hall of Fame second baseman Robbie Alomar.
Yep.
And also on this Blue Jay team was an outfielder from San Diego, Joe Carter, who they had traded for a couple of years ago. And Toronto was the defending world champions from 92.
John Olerud is raking.
John Olerud won the batting title. They had that year, Toronto had their top 3 guys in the AL in batting average. It was Olerud, Molitor, and Alomar. Like top to bottom, they have great starting pitching, a solid bullpen. If it wasn't for the Yankees' emergence in the 90s, I feel like they're almost a forgotten, not necessarily dynasty, but just like...
They won 2 in a row.
That's what I mean. It's like they were really good.
Yeah.
And what the team that you don't want to see is an offensive powerhouse with the relief pitching that the Phillies are
and
bringing.
They just
That's the
added
thing.
Ricky Henderson.
Yes,
People.
just to get on base and screw you over.
And their GM has to be recognized as one of the greatest GMs ever. Pat Gillick, who ended up being GM of the Phillies in 2008. A guy who I've read interviews where he's like, I cannot believe the rest of the league didn't realize how good Roberto Alomar was. He kept getting Alomar anywhere
he had him in Baltimore.
Yeah. Alomar was one of the most underrated players of that time for some reason.
Oh yeah, I mean, if he didn't spit on that umpire, he made the Hall of Fame, but he would have been first ballot. Arguably the best second baseman of his generation. But heading to the World Series, and again, it's the clash of styles. The business-like Blue Jays against the hard-partying, awesome Phillies.
Yeah.
I remember watching this thinking like, well, there are guys I like on both teams. Like, who am I going to root for?
Which former Padre do I select?
Yes, exactly. Which one? You
That's
pick the
Dom's
name
childhood.
out of a damn hat. Oh, there are a lot of reasons for my substance abuse. But World Series, October 16th, it kicks off at Skydome because, well, the Blue Jays had a better record. And I think the World Series, when there wasn't any all-star game scenario like there is now, I think the team with the best record goes out there. So the first game is Juan Guzman, who had a very productive career in Toronto, against Curt Schilling. They roll out Schilling in game 1. And the Phillies get staked to an early lead in the top of the first with their Dykstra, Dalton, and Kruk combination.
Combo,
they go up 2-0, and Schilling looks like he's pitching pretty well. I mean, he's kind of cruising through the game, going through the lineup, doing a decent job. They end up going up 3-2 on a John Kruk single, but what ends up happening is Toronto fights back, and in the bottom of the fifth, Devon White hits a solo homer off of Schilling to tie it at 4.
Yeah.
And the Blue Jays were so stacked that Al Leiter, who was starting on World Series and pennant-winning teams in the mid-'90s, was one of their middle relievers.
Yeah.
Like David Wells was also in that mix the previous season, and he really shuts down Philadelphia to the point where Toronto can come back and start getting after Schilling.
Yeah.
They end up winning this game 8-5 because their offense just Alomar, Molitor, Carter, White. I mean, top to bottom, it's all-stars.
Yep.
Or a future Hall of Famer or two. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy. So they're down 1-0, but Philly's not out of this. Philly's not out of this. Going to game 2, and it's Dave Stewart versus Terry Mulholland. Dave Stewart,
Former Philly.
former
My
Philly.
dad hated Dave Stewart.
Yeah.
Every time
Oh,
we
yeah.
faced Dave Stewart, I heard, this motherfucker never pitched well for us. And then he goes on to be like a Cy Young for
He
every
resurrected his career in
Yeah.
Oakland,
Yeah.
and he had not lost a postseason game
Yeah.
up to that point.
It's almost as if when he got to Oakland, somebody maybe on the A's had something that helped his strength.
Magic
Or
pills.
something.
Pills, yeah. He got those magic beans
Yeah.
from the Bash
Should have
Brothers.
stayed a little bit more in Philly. Lenny could have hooked him up, but don't worry about
Sorry
it.
for my cursing there, but
Please curse
this
more.
is what I
Curse
heard.
as much as
My
you'd
dad
like.
loathed Dave Stewart.
I'm sure. It's the worst when you see somebody get traded and you're like, oh, now you're going to play?
Man, oh,
Yeah.
someone decided to care. Pardon
Yeah.
me, Your Majesty.
Yeah.
It's a pitcher's duel into the top of the third. Dykstra walks. Then there's a wild pitch. Duncan walks. Kruk singles him home. And then Eisenreich hits just an absolute monster dinger off of Stewart, off a
Yeah.
forkball. And they score 3 more runs to go up 5-0, which you're thinking, this shouldn't be happening. Terry Mulholland beating
Yep.
Dave Stewart? Like, this is absolutely nuts. They head into the bottom of the 8th with Mason in. Molitor doubles, and then Williams comes in after a Carter strikeout. Molitor steals third base, and then Olerud singles him, gets a sac fly to close the gap to within 6-4. So Toronto, that's the thing you find out about Toronto just never gives up.
Right.
Like they're just like, well, our talent will probably win out
Yeah.
at some
Yeah.
point. But Williams comes in. Williams is in the game. Alomar gets a walk, steals second base because Mitch can't hold anybody on base.
Yeah.
But he makes probably the play of the series for him when he picks Alomar off of second base trying to steal third.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I
it was
remember that.
Yeah, he gets him in a rundown, picking him off, and it basically saves the game for Philly to win 6-4.
Yeah.
Like it was
That's huge.
Yeah, it was just a crazy set of events because you're thinking, oh, they're going to get to him.
I was
just
going to say
like
they're
Atlanta
starting to
did.
rally and like
Yeah.
he steals second, and then you're thinking, well, Williams is on the
Yep.
bags, or yeah. So
When you listen to these games described, it really is what people are talking about with like, now it's like home runs and strikeouts. And back
Yeah.
then it was
Walks,
hits and walks
sac
and
flies.
scoring. And yeah.
A lot of
Maybe-
action on the base paths.
Yeah. Yeah. Different era of baseball.
Yeah, hopefully the new rule changes make it more watchable.
yeah, I
see.
agree.
But Philly does what they need to do, though, as the road team. They steal one. They steal one on the road, heading into Game 3. Veterans Stadium going absolutely insane. And this is Pat Henkin, who eventually won a Cy Young for Toronto, I think in 96.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, against, and he's like a rookie this season, too. And Danny Jackson. Unfortunately for the Phillies, this isn't the night that Jackson has it.
Right.
Toronto's bats basically just come out
Yeah.
and destroy them. They go up 3-0 in the top of the first.
Yeah.
No matter how hard Philadelphia keeps trying, they end up just getting completely ass blasted and lose 10-2 because
Yep.
Henkin works out of a first. The only time they touched him was that first inning when he loaded the bases, but he gets out of that jam, and Toronto ends up just cruising.
Still just counts as one loss, just like Game 2 in the NLCS.
Yes.
We're going to get into Game 4. I'm going to hide under the table here.
I was just gonna
as
say,
we
this is
relive Game
the-
4.
So Game 4, if you don't know, is arguably one of the most insane World Series games ever played. It features everything but pitching. I think it has, I think, every like statistical check mark you could have except pitching.
Yeah.
I mean, the pitchers, kind of shitty.
Yeah.
Let's just be
run
honest.
through it. Let me see if I remember my emotions, just highs and lows.
So
throughout
so Toronto, they had a 3-man rotation in the ALCS. They go to a 4-man rotation for the World Series. They pitched Todd Stottlemyre against Tommy Green.
Okay.
And in the top of the first, this is just a preview of kind of the craziness. And it's a cold, kind of rainy, because it's raining on and off at Veterans Stadium. Henderson doubles, White gets a walk, and then a Carter single with the bases loaded and 2 outs. Then you have a Molitor walk and a Fernandez single to make the game 3-0. Philadelphia counters in the bottom of the first
Yep.
Yeah.
by scoring 4 runs,
Yep.
including a Milt Thompson triple with the bases loaded. In the bottom of the second, Dykstra hits a 2-run home run to go up 5-3 or 6-3, and then in the top of the second, this was after Stottlemyre walked, tried to advance to third on an Alomar single and got gunned down by Dykstra. And I don't know if you've ever seen the video, but he cuts his lip on the infield dirt sliding into third base.
Yeah.
So they left him in the game pitching, and the bandage falls off. It looks like he has this huge gash and blood's rolling.
So there's
everywhere.
a hit to the outfield, and he's trying to advance to second, and he's thrown out.
Well, no. He's
To third.
He's advancing from first to third because Alomar hits one.
American League pitcher trying to go first.
National League. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was
Different
bad.
era.
Yeah, different era. The game goes. It's just lead change after lead change because then it's 6-3, then it's 7-6, then it's 7-7. But you think Philadelphia has it in the bag when they put up 5 runs after another Dalton home run and a Dykstra home run.
Yep.
You're thinking, okay, it's 12-7.
Yeah.
I also remember, I think the Eagles weren't having a good year, and I remember the announcers saying the Phillies have outscored the Eagles this week.
Oh, yeah.
Poor Randall Cunningham. So it's 12-7 in the bottom of the 5th. The top of the 6th, White double and Alomar single basically cut the deficit to 12-9.
Yep.
And then in the bottom of the 6th, Hollins has a double, Thompson has a single, and then it's 13-9. It's 13-9.
Yep.
And then it's 14-9 when in the bottom of the 7th when Duncan gets a hit, Kruk and Hollins get walked, and then Dalton gets hit by pitch with the bases loaded. It's 14-9.
Yeah.
It's 14-9. You're thinking they've tied the series. Everything is going to go all right.
And the
after
bases
7
are still
innings.
loaded, though, so they do get out of that.
Yeah,
game
they
without
got out of
getting
it.
more. Okay.
Mhm.
Wow.
Tony Castillo was pitching for the Blue Jays there.
Yeah.
And then in the top of the 8th, they bring in Larry Anderson.
Okay.
They bring in Anderson because they're not trusting in Mitch. But mind you, both starters I don't think lasted 2 innings.
Right.
Alomar grounds out to start the inning. Carter hits a single. Olerud walks.
What you want.
So you have runners on first and second with 1 out. And Paul Molitor, who has absolutely been crushing Philadelphia pitching, starter or bullpen all series, hits a ground ball, and it's not particularly
This
sharply
game's in
hit.
Philadelphia,
Yeah.
so that means they started him over Olerud at first, right?
That was the big controversy because
Yeah.
people were, you're sitting down the guy who won a batting title. It's like, well, this
Right.
guy's going to the Hall of Fame one day.
Got to
So-
give it to Cito Gaston. That's
Well,
a good move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of what Molitor does here.
Well, it's not necessarily what Molitor does. It's what Dave Hollins does.
Oh, okay.
Because he hits a ground ball down the third baseline.
Where's
That's kind
Kim
of like
Batiste with you?
he would have thrown it into right field. It's just a chopper on that old AstroTurf,
Yeah.
and Hollins is kind of backing up awkwardly, and he misplays it, and it rolls into left field.
Yeah.
Then he misplays the ground ball, so Carter scores, and this is when they bring in Williams. To me, they probably should have just stuck with Anderson, but
Yeah.
Tony Fernandez, who was also a former Padre, traded away for nothing and back in Toronto, gets an RBI
Traded for the
single.
dryer.
Yeah, traded for the dryer because you got to have that combo. He has an RBI single. Pat Borders, the previous year's World Series MVP, walks. They get Ed Sprague. He strikes him out. But then Ricky Henderson, because it's an embarrassment of riches, comes in.
Yep.
2-run single. And then Devon White follows with a 2-run triple. Alomar bats again and grounds out.
Oh,
They
my
batted
goodness.
around in the inning to take a 15. They scored 6 runs to take a 15-14 lead.
And it's crazy to think that Alomar grounded out twice in this rally.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Everything in between.
Yep.
Just getting that first out was huge.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. It was just a shit sandwich.
I realize now I blocked the specifics of that out of my mind since that happened. but
when
that
I
was-
rewatched this shit, I'm like,
Yeah.
no wonder Jim Fregosi took up smoking again during
Yeah.
this season. I mean, it makes complete and total sense.
Yep.
Well, I just know going back or after this game, Williams had death threats. So-
Yeah.
and that's, you know what? That's the
lame.
Philly fans, you
Yeah.
know? Philly fanatic.
You
The
suck
frenetic?
is fine.
Yeah.
You blew it. Don't threaten to kill the guy. Jeez.
Some guy in a green bodysuit showed up at his door.
Yep.
But the bottom of the 9th, Dwayne Ward is in, the Blue Jays closer. Duncan pops out, Kruk strikes out, and then Hollins flies out. It was actually the longest World Series game ever played
Wow.
in terms of time. They talked to Kruk after the game, and he's like, I don't know how the hell we lost that.
I'm sure,
Like,
yeah.
He was like 14-9, Thought it was in the bag.
Man.
Thought it was in the bag. But they do have hope. Philadelphia has hope in Game 5, and it comes in the form of Curt Schilling.
Yep. Was it delayed a day due to rain? I'm misremembering.
No,
that.
They
Okay.
played the next night at Veterans Stadium. He's
I
all
think it
together.
started late due to rain.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's Guzman against Schilling for
Yeah.
the second time. And in my opinion, this is the greatest World Series non-clinching, pinching performance I've ever seen by Curt Schilling. Like,
Yeah.
people always talk about him in Arizona and then later Boston. This, to me, is
You
the
look
game.
at the lineup he's facing and what
Yes.
he did. Yeah.
So I was going to go over the lineup here because
it's either
of how
him or
important.
Cliff Lee in Game 1 against the Yankees.
That
and the
also
Niners,
was-
the two greatest pitching
yeah.
performances I've seen from a Philly in a postseason game. But yeah.
Ricky Henderson leading off, greatest leadoff hitter ever, Hall of Fame. Devon White, 3-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glover. Roberto Alomar, Hall of Fame. Joe Carter, 5-time All-Star, 396 career homers. John Olerud, batting title, 2-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove. And Paul Molitor, Hall of Fame. Tony Fernandez, 5-time All-Stars, 4-time Gold Glover. Pat Borders, the 92 World Series MVP.
Yeah.
And because it's a National League park, Juan Guzman.
Yeah.
They can't all be winners, can they?
Right.
Schilling goes into the game and completely. It's like Game 1 in Atlanta.
Yep.
He completely shuts him down. He gives up a walk to Alomar in the top of the first, but in the bottom of the first, and this is really crucial for Philadelphia, they need to score runs.
Yeah.
And Guzman's a tough, forkball type of pitcher at this stage of his career. A Dykstra walk, then they get to stolen base, and then advances to third on a bad throw by Pat Borders into center field, and Kruk singles him in for 1-0. And that's all Philadelphia would need in this game
Yep.
because of how incredible that Curt Schilling was. Throughout the game, 6 strikeouts. He throws 147 pitches. Could you imagine a pitcher doing that now?
I would like to see them try more.
Yeah,
The
no.
Phillies, anyway.
it-
Zach Wheeler seems like give him a shot, but yeah.
Well, I saw he was wearing a pin after the last game. It was I survived Mitch Williams game.
Yeah.
Oh.
Game 4.
Because at this point, he's pissing Williams off, too.
Wow.
Well, and they were like, "Hey, do you think that's appropriate?" Or says something. He just goes, "Well, Mitch gave it to me," and then they were like, "I don't think that's true." And then in this game, they asked him about it, and he was just like, "No, I was going to complete that game." And
Yeah.
he didn't say like I was going to let Mitch come in. He was just like, "I was going to finish that game."
Yeah.
They did.
Friday night game, I remember, huge.
Yep.
Gave us hope.
The bottom of the second, Philadelphia scores again. Dalton has a leadoff double. And then I believe Eisenreich advanced him, and then Stocker ends up scoring him. And that was the only offense because outside of those two innings, Guzman is shutting him down too. So this is a pitcher's duel to end all pitchers' duel. And until the top of the 8th inning, Toronto had not advanced a base runner past second.
Yeah. Amazing with that lineup.
I mean, that's just crazy. And in the top of the 8th, Schilling ends up getting in a bit of a jam. Willie Cagnate's pitch running at third base.
Yeah.
They get the slow tapper back to him, and they catch him in that rundown, and that ends all hope. And they had talked about when Schilling came into the dugout after that inning, he's looking around and going, I got to finish this.
Yeah.
We can't send it back to the bullpen.
Yeah. You guys know who Zach Hampel is, the guy that
Yeah,
catches? He actually, I saw recently, he went to that game and he's posted a home video.
Did he really?
Rainy night. That's how I remembered it was delayed because he's there
Yeah.
for the rain delay, and it's kind of cool footage just to see from a fan's perspective.
Yeah,
And he's
of
not
him
so
when he
annoying
was
with
a-
his,
Yeah,
he
right.
wasn't so annoying.
Yeah.
No offense, Hampel, if you watch this. But
Goes out for the top of the 9th, gets a Carter fly out to the infield.
Yep.
Olerud ground out, and Molitor ends up flying out to Dykstra. 9 innings pitch. I mean, a complete game shutout.
yeah.
But that's the type of mentality I feel like this team had. Just like, we're not out of it. We're never out of this. If we get some starting pitching, we can do this.
I remember I was still nervous about how it would go, but I was happy he ended it quick. I could flip over and watch Boy Meets World that Friday night. And,
Yep.
Get your Topanga Lawrence on?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
So but that's the thing. They have to go back to Toronto
Yep.
for the last 2 games of the series.
Yep.
October 23rd,
They
1993.
didn't go in scared and they didn't play that way.
They
So
didn't.
We'll get into
no,
game 6.
No. Interestingly enough, because it's Stewart versus Mulholland, Toronto ends up getting an early lead, and it's in the bottom of the first where White walks, Molitor hits a double, Carter gets a sacrifice, Olerud doubles, and then Alomar singles to get them up 3-0.
Wow.
But that's the thing. They were never out of it. They were never out of these games.
Yep.
It's crazy. I mean, they're down 3-0 in the top of the fourth, but an Eisenreich single gets them back to 3-1. Bottom of the fourth, though, Alomar doubles, advances on a Fernandez ground out, and then a Sprague sac fly pushes the lead to 3 again.
Yep.
In the, bottom of the sixth, Alomar has a leadoff single, but they end up getting out of the jam here. And then the top of the seventh is when Philly finally starts to turn it on.
Dykstra pops one, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the inning where Stalker walks, Morandini singles, and then Dykstra ties the game.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, we talked much about Kevin Stalker. He came up at the end of the year and played great defense and had some big hits. Just throwing that out
Interesting,
there.
Ken.
Gift that keeps giving because he then gets us Bobby Abreu.
I was going to say that. Interesting tidbit. Yeah, he got traded for Abreu. What was it? Larry Boa was always a fan of his because he was like a shortstop just like him.
Yep.
Like good defense, not a lot of power, but just one of the guys.
Yep.
Like the rest of the team. There, so the game is tied.
Did Dykstra hit 2 in this game, or
he just hit the 1?
Okay. Okay.
So it's tied at 5 after a Holland single. But what ends up happening is Dalton walks. Eisenreich hits a chopper to Danny Cox, who they put in the game, that just kind of dies in the middle of the infield.
Yeah.
And they end up taking a lead 6-5 on an Incaviglia sac fly. Later. So they're up 6-5 heading into the 7th, and you're thinking, get to a game 7.
Yep.
Get to a game 7, damn it.
Yep.
And to the bullpen's credit, they held this lead.
Yeah.
They held this lead with Roger Mason and Larry Anderson. The problem was with Anderson in the bottom of the 8th, Toronto doesn't score any runs, but because guys at the bottom of their order, like Tony Fernandez and Ed Sprague and Pat Borders get to bat, it turns the lineup over for the 9th inning.
Yeah.
So Anderson gets out of the jam unscathed, but you're heading into the bottom of the 9th after scoring no runs in the top of the 9th with Ricky Henderson, Devon White, Paul Molitor out the gate.
And you've got the Phillies had a fighting mindset. The Blue Jays are sitting there saying we can win this, and then I think it's Mitch Will.
Don't put any of your other relievers in. Just put the guy you're supposed to.
Yep.
And there's what was talk that by that point in the season, Williams had thrown so much because he had, I think, 43 saves that year.
Yeah.
Is he had lost some velocity on his fastball.
And maybe some control.
Yep. And they were, was control ever there, Chris?
Yeah.
Control is never the issue.
I wonder if Fergosi thought about getting creative, like you see now, like not to bring up bad memories for you, but in
Suarez,
the NLCS we used Ranger Suarez to close it out
smart.
on short rest after starting. Maybe throw Danny Jackson in there.
Why not?
I don't know.
Well, I think
he had pitched a bad game in Game 3, but
he would have been the next day's starter. I think. No.
Yeah. There's no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow.
True.
As they would learn. As we will get into the bottom of this.
So Mitch Williams comes in, and I had talked about how they were tweaking not only with his mechanics, but also having him pitch from the stretch to hold runners on.
Yeah.
So he's facing the greatest leadoff hitter in Major League Baseball history out the gate. And he's licking his chops. And I believe he also is number 1 in MLB history in walks because of how great his plate discipline was.
And I believe Williams walks him on about 4 pitches that are
he walks
nowhere near the
Henderson
zone.
on 4 pitches. And when he gets on, the Toronto crowd's going nuts. He does get Devon White on a flyout. He does get him, and you're thinking, oh, man, Game 7, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, might have seen Schilling pitch in Game 7. Who knows if he – but, he's pitching from the stretch. Paul Molitor singles to put 2 guys on with 1 out.
Yep.
The game-winning run is now on first base in the form of Paul Molitor. And coming to bat is Joe Carter, who, like I said before, 396 career dingers. He had a hell of a career. He was I'd say for like a 7-8 season stretch, he was 30 home runs, 100 RBIs a year. You could just lock it in.
Yep.
And he's pitching to Carter, gets the count to 2-2, embarrassed him earlier in the at-bat with the slider and says, I'll throw him another one. I'll throw him another slider. And at 2-2 pitch, he corks it into the left field corner for a
Yep.
3-run dinger to win the game, 8-6.
Just kill all those Philly
Kill all those
hopes.
fans' hopes and dreams. How'd you
Yep.
feel about that, Charles?
Honestly, it wasn't as bad. Like I talk about crying during the Braves
Yeah.
when we ended up
Yeah.
winning. I was kind of it probably looking back for how bad Williams had been. It wasn't a shock. I think I remember when we walked Henderson, my dad saying we're gonna lose. Probably like, I was just kind of a little numb, and then over the days, realized it was an amazing season.
Yeah.
Similar to how things just ended in 2022 for the
Kind of
Phillies.
like when I watched
Yeah.
Bryce Harper hit that home run.
Yeah.
Just like, wow,
Yeah.
son of a bitch.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch Williams has gotten a lot of shit for it, and that's a shame because he got 43 saved, helped us get there.
He wasn't every guy. It seemed like
He was
up and
what he
down.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I mean, up and down the 25-man roster, they got something from everybody this
Yeah.
season.
Yes.
Like in guys in different positions, and just a group of guys who congealed for 1 year
Yeah.
to put it all together. And you were thinking, man, what could they do in
Yeah.
the future?
It's only the second time ever the World Series ended on a walk-off, right?
Yeah.
And there hasn't been one since.
No.
That's what stinks about it. It gets replayed.
yeah.
All the time.
Game 6 against the Astros,
Yep.
the Phillies are up 1-0, and they play that. And I'm like, why do you got to play that coming back from commercial? Like, why?
It's just it's just salt in the wound of a fan.
So I'm
just
hoping
like,
somebody else can do a damn walk-off in the World
Yeah,
Series.
they can
start
World Series
showing that.
pretty soon.
somebody new.
Yeah.
It was Mitch Williams. I saw him talking about the pitch, and he was like, "You gotta blame Joe Carter. Son of a bitch hit a home run. Don't
Yeah.
blame me." He's like, "I threw the pitch and he hit it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming off of 93, you're hoping that good times would be ahead for Philadelphia, but
Yeah.
they find themselves with the Braves in their same division, who are continuing their streak.
And the Expos in
and the
94.
Expos in 94.
And it doesn't matter anyway in 94.
No, it doesn't matter at all.
No, I do. What stuck in my car, we had a better closer, I think, for every year after. I think we had Heathcliff Slocum had a great year as closer. Ricky Vitalico did a great job closing.
Steve Bedrock Bedrosian.
Yeah.
And tell me who Von Hayes is.
We just needed one more reliever. That's what's crazy to
Yeah.
upset the Blue Jays. If we had one more reliever, maybe we could have done it,
From 94 to 2000, I wrote this down. They finished
Yeah.
last 3 times. They
Yeah.
never won above 77 games. And they had Terry Francona as their manager in
Yep,
this.
and he gets fired after 2000, losing 100 games.
Yep.
But they
but-
luckily drafted well. They drafted
Yes, they
Scott
did.
Rowland, Jimmy Rollins, Pat Burrell during that time.
A good second baseman in
Yeah.
the mold of Roberto Alomar
Yeah.
when their GM is
Yeah,
Pat
and then
Gillick.
in the ensuing years, they draft Hamels, Utley, Howard. That's an amazing run of draft picks,
Cole Hamels from Rancho Bernardo.
Yeah.
I thought I'd add that. God damn it.
Yeah.
Why? You have so much talent even around you.
Yeah.
But then they start reeling them off. In 06, they almost make the playoffs.
Yeah.
07, they win the NL East after a wonderful Mets collapse.
Yep.
I mean, that was comical. Very similar to this past year. And then
Sorry, Dave Margolis.
Sorry, Dave, but it was. Scherzer should not have been throwing those pitches. But then from 28 to 2011, they experienced pretty much a mini dynasty.
Yep.
In the NL, they're
Couldn't
the
have
NL's
the second
best
world
team.
title, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
And I blame the Padres again for 2010.
Yep.
Letting the Giants in.
I blame everything for 2010.
Yeah.
But yeah, they win in 08. They win a pennant in 09.
Yep.
2010 is that Giants year where Kane and Lincecum were electric. And then 2011, I don't care for St. Louis and watching them lose that.
We let them in. We swept
Yeah.
the Braves to close the year.
Don't let them in.
I know.
Don't let them in,
learned
damn
that
it.
now.
And all I can see is Ryan Howard struggling out of the batter's box.
Yeah, it was a brutal end to a great run for
And-
the Phillies.
Then they had kind of one of those other gaps up
Yeah.
until this past year.
Yeah.
Where they broke my heart so much.
They went all in with that group, though.
They
I
did.
can't blame them.
No, hell no.
They kept
Absolutely.
trading young talent. And that young talent didn't turn out to be much.
No.
Carlos Carrasco is probably the best guy we traded
Yeah,
away
exactly.
to accumulate Lee and all those guys. So
No, I mean that's a testament to that organization, how well they've
Yeah.
done. And '93 though is just the magic year.
yeah,
I mean even though
everything
they
that
won,
went right in '93 didn't happen again. The guys didn't stay healthy. Certain guys didn't step up anymore. Poor Schilling is saddled. He would definitely be a Hall of Famer aside from his attitude and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
If he was on a better team in the late 90s. He's just,
right? Yeah, I mean, because he's like
he's just marooned on this Phillies island of nothing.
he's borderline Hall of Famer with his stats regular season. Then you go
Yeah.
postseason, you're like, he's
He
in.
should be.
And then you're seeing, QAnon level shit on social media, and you're like, hey, buddy, just
Yeah.
sit the next couple of plays out.
Yep.
Don't
But-
say everything that creeps up into your head. That's all I'm saying.
Oh boy.
All right, that's our episode.
Thanks for
93
being here,
Phillies.
Charles.
Yeah,
you
thank you
guys.
so
This was a lot of
much,
fun,
man.
Yeah.
I'm down to come back for anything.
Anything you
Awesome.
want to add about shows and stuff? Because Charles does comedy here in town with us. Just
Nothing. Got nothing.
All right.
All right.
I like that. Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks.